Thanks, Amy. Well, thanks everyone for joining this evening. Amy, I think you covered all of the announcements, and good to see in the chat kind of like how the icebreaker really helped to set some of the context for the conversation tonight.
So I think we just need to do a quick roll call of who our commissioners are that are on the call so that we can be set up. So Mia Blom, present.
Ben Zajcik, present.
Lisa Ferretto, present.
Nicolette Saint, present.
It's that last person. Garrett Lyles is present.
And are any of the callers who were on commissioners? Okay, so then we should probably move forward with CAP so that we can get the vote that's needed.
So Valerie Roop, who is our climate resilience manager, led that effort, and she'll share that with us.
Hi, everyone. So Amy's going to kindly put the slides forward for me. So just wanted to thank her for that. So I'm Valerie Roop, I'm the Climate and Resilience Program Manager with the city here in the Office of Sustainability. And as many of you know, we've been working on a climate action plan since October of 2022. So next slide, please. So you can bump ahead to 2. So I'm just going to start off with a little quick summary of where we've been, and then go into the content of the plan and talk a little bit about the feedback we received and the final product. So next slide, please. So just as a background, the first climate action plan was approved just over 10 years ago. And since then, there has been the announcement of our greenhouse gas emission reduction plan to reach carbon neutrality by 2045. So there were some updates made to the plan and captured in the sustainability plan in 2019, but this plan really looks to put us on a path to carbon neutrality. It does focus on, it's a 10-year plan, so it's focusing a little more on the 60% reduction by 2030, and that's relative to 2007 levels. But a few things just to note with this plan, and lessons learned, we've really made sure to prioritize equity in each step of this process, from its outreach strategy to its implementation plan. It includes a financial analysis so that we'll have an idea of what costs the city will incur when implementing certain aspects of this plan that are under its control. And it considers co-benefits and community benefits that will result from each action. Those are not necessarily tangible financially, but they do bring great benefit to the city itself. So this update to the Climate Action Plan is a roadmap for reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 60% from 2007 to 2030. Next slide, please. Just a little overview of the timeline, other direction there. A little bit more, please. Apologies. But the timeline, it's an overview of where we've been. We started in 2022, towards Q4 of that year, with community engagement and some of the analysis. Working through the year 2023, we continue with engagement and plan development. We did finalize that plan in December after a public comment period, incorporating that, and now we're bringing it to the commissions for approval. Just as a note, that community engagement did result in over 2,600 unique engagements. Next slide, please. The CAP update was shaped by data and technical strategy, and equally so by community inputs and priorities, particularly those communicated by people in frontline communities. And frontline communities are those communities that are most affected by climate change and often are under-resourced to address that. So we really made a lot of conscious effort to engage with those communities so we can hear from them and make sure this plan reflects their priorities. Next slide, please. So the CAP begins the plan itself begins with overviews of the purpose of the plan, how we can take action and targets for reducing greenhouse gases, and details of how we'll carry out a few specific actions. Next slide, please. It also includes guiding principles. These were things that we developed to really look at how we as a city and as a community can integrate the principles of the plan into this and other public plans, so that we can really make sure we're embodying, what is in this plan to make it a reality. Next slide, please. The first climate action plan set a target to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 15% by the year 2020 compared to what it had been in 2010. We realized at that time that somewhere in that time that we were not doing enough. So as I mentioned, in 2019, the sustainability plan was updated to go to these more aggressive climate targets. These targets are in line with the Paris Agreement that almost 200 nations in the country around the world have adopted to try to reduce to increase their climate resiliency goals and reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. We set a new target in that sustainability plan to create 25% less greenhouse gases between 2020 over the 2007 levels. The CAP update aligns not only with the Paris Agreement, as I mentioned, but also it's actually pretty much in step 1 year ahead of the state plan the state plan that just was released as well. Next slide, please. So while creating this plan, we are careful to make choices that we would help reduce problems in frontline communities and to balance our decisions of high impact actions with those that will benefit everyone in Baltimore. So through that process, we talked to thousands of people across the city. And as I mentioned, we did put a great priority on frontline communities. We also involved a lot of technical experts and other folks so we can really make sure that we get a balanced plan that'll help us to hit those climate reduction goals while also benefiting neighborhoods in Baltimore. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, we really did take a deep dive into some of the data that's compiled on greenhouse gas emissions in the city. So I'll just review that very quickly just to make sure everyone's aware of that. Next slide, please. So in this slide, you'll see that buildings are really what produces the most emissions in the city of Baltimore, followed by transportation and waste. So those are some of the primary areas that this climate action plan is focused on, actions that would reduce those 3 areas. Next slide, please. This is our greenhouse gas forecast for 2045. So you'll see that if we were, and how it would change over time. You'll see that if the city's emissions will increase in the future if we do nothing. So we have seen a decrease, but it will level out and start to tip back up again if we do have no further actions. If the city does, that would greenhouse gases being declined by about 15% overall from the 2007 levels by 2045. We of course want to make it carbon neutral, so we really do need to take more aggressive action, which is what we've outlined in this plan. Next slide, please. So to understand how we meet those targets, the city developed a greenhouse gas reduction pathway. A greenhouse gas reduction pathway is made with several technological strategies. Each strategy helps reduce greenhouse gases. Technological strategies include using renewable energy in electric cars. The pathway shows that it'll take for the city to meet the 2030 and 2045 targets. However, the strategies and pathways are not always very easy or due to cost and capacity, and we'll talk a little more about that. In this graph, you'll see that the greenhouse gas forecast is the top dotted line. The bottom dotted line shows what is needed to meet the city's targets. The greenhouse gas reduction strategies are the color wedge between the 2 lines. Each colored section shows a greenhouse gas reduction for each of some of the primary strategies within the plan. Next slide, please. So how can we get to carbon neutrality? These are a few ways that are identified in the plan of reaching that. Some of them include switching to clean energy sources, replacing vehicles and equipment with more energy efficient alternatives, reducing vehicle miles, and diverting waste from landfills or incineration. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we had months and months of community engagement, but we also had our public comment period, which took place in October of 2023. So once we drafted the plan, we put that out for public comments, and we received a great deal of feedback that really helped us to customize this plan for Baltimore. How we received it is we collected it through meetings, through listening sessions, and through Conveo, which is the online public commenting tool used by the city of Baltimore. We distributed in advance of the public comment period promotional toolkits to over 150 community-based organizations, neighborhood associations, as well as to all the elected officials' offices that are of people representing this area in advance of that period, so that we could make sure to really promote that so people knew it was coming and were ready to submit their comments when that opened up. And those toolkits did include flyers in English and Spanish. We also heavily promoted the public comment period on social media and provided information to other city agencies to help us promote it. And we held several meetings and presentations that the public can engage in. In total, we had 438 people view the plan online and dozens of written comments. Next slide, please. So just a quick overview of what we heard from the public comment. That nature-based climate solutions should be a key strategy of the climate action plan. So we did add a section to the plan focused on that. That members of the public were interested in seeing a strong position being taken by the city of Baltimore on 2 items. One being supporting the Red Line project, and another restricting or eliminating waste incineration in the city. Public also noted that they really wanted to see more improved public transit that connects more people, especially people in frontline communities, to destinations across the city, and that transit needs to be reliable and safe as well. They also wanted to see robust involvement in the implementation through partners and the general public, with emphasis involving members of frontline and environmental justice communities, as well as youth. That the city of Baltimore really should make a priority extensive education and outreach and promote adoption of more climate resilient lifestyles and practices. And also to make sure that that's more accessible to more people in the city. So, everything from different types of reading comprehension to different types of activities, different languages, just making sure that we're really spreading the net wide to reach more people in Baltimore. And they also wanted to make sure that we made it very clear that the CAP is focused on greenhouse gas emission reduction, and that this plan builds on other plans that exist that are also looking to address climate resilience. So for instance, the sustainability plan that we mentioned, the disaster preparedness plan, solid waste management plan, and others all put out strategies around climate resilience. So this plan was not seeking to replicate that. Those plans already exist, but we did want to build on that and enhance it. So this plan does focus more on greenhouse gas emission reduction, but it should never be viewed in a vacuum. It's definitely part of a body of plans that the city is undertaking to address climate resilience. Next slide, please. Well, I'm sure the other folks here have read the plan or looked at it, possibly even during the public comment period. And then again, since it's been up again online again, I just want to quickly summarize some of the actions outlined in the CAP. Next slide, please. So buildings, within the topic of buildings, actions include making buildings more solar ready and increasing solar and other low or no emission energy sources in homes and neighborhoods. Many incentives and programs are available through state government, so we'll look to coordinate with them to promote these resources. Other actions will focus on decreasing energy use in buildings and switching from using fossil fuels to heat, cool, and power buildings into more efficient sources. Different municipal actions will require planning, policy, and development of benchmarks. Also, to support the transition to more fossil fuel alternatives, we plan to partner with utility companies to ensure the smooth transition of alternative energy sources, so there's no disruption to services. Because as we're looking to go more towards electric, that puts more stress on the grid, so that's going to take a lot of concentrated effort. And then the next 2 slides just show those actions that are outlined in the plan itself. Which of course is available online to read. Actions focused around electricity. Many of these actions really overlap with buildings, so we separated them out into different sections of the plan, but they really do dovetail with one another. The ones that are focused specifically on electricity are really looking at the capacity of the grid, as I mentioned, working with energy providers on that, promoting and expanding incentives, and transitioning city fleets to electric vehicles into electric equipment as well. All right, and then next slide group, please, for the transportation. Thank you. Actions in transportation focus more on providing more convenient and accessible alternatives to using individual fossil fuel vehicles. It calls for study and transition to zero to low emission city fleets and equipment when viable alternatives exist, because we do need, not all of them necessarily have viable alternatives yet, but their technology is changing quickly, and we're going to keep an eye on that and keep moving that forward. There's other actions that will also focus on increasing charging vehicle facilities for electric vehicles, and seeking ways to increase access to electric vehicles, such as car sharing and carpooling, so that there are fewer single owner vehicles on the road. Next section, please. One more, please. Oh, sorry, one more after that. Perfect, thank you. The Department of Public Works recently worked on a solid waste management plan that included a very robust plan for zero waste initiatives. So this plan builds on that and underlines and expands on a few of those actions. And some of those really being, looking at citywide composting, as well as expanding organic waste diversion programs and supporting circular economies in Baltimore. The CAP also includes actions to support water savings programs and reduce the energy used to produce clean water. It also looks at revising city systems like procurement to ensure climate-friendly considerations that are given in city purchasing. Next section, please. Go to the next, to the nature-based solutions. This section will focus on preserving nature-based assets, what we currently have in the city, as well as expanding them. This is important not only because it provides people with access to nature, but also because there is a potential for conflict of other goals if we focus solely on those new goals. For instance, expanding the electric grid could disrupt migratory patterns for birds, or sites for community solar could conflict with efforts to expand the tree canopy. So coordination and thoughtful planning is needed in this arena. Our actions will focus mainly on forestry, green spaces, and green infrastructure. These nature-based climate solutions offer significant community benefits because they provide people with access to nature. This provides them with mental and physical health benefits while also making nature a part of people's lives, which helps to increase the likelihood of them advocating for nature and climate resilience as a whole. Next slide, please. There are several actions that don't fit into one of the previously mentioned sections, but they are equally important. For instance, we'll seek to raise awareness of the plan and the actions taken to advance our climate resilience and increase transparency of our progress towards the goal of reaching carbon neutrality by 2045. So some of the actions in here talk about developing centralized tools for climate actions and an outreach and engagement program, and developing some plans and really distributing that climate action data. Next slide, please. So moving forward, we'll need to set this plan into action. Next slide. So as mentioned briefly, to do so, we decided to outline a few of the actions to demonstrate how the city might approach the climate action plan. We selected 10 complex climate actions that are priorities for the city to receive additional guidance in the form of implementation roadmaps. These roadmaps show how we can approach each of these actions over the next 10 years. Different city departments talked about the steps to make each of these actions happen, including who's responsible, what partners are needed to accomplish the action, how to measure the success of the action, how to stay on track with action implementation, and the funds and other support that are needed to complete the action. Careful consideration was given to ensure these implementation roadmaps can help us get what we need out of the actions, and to accomplish what we're seeking to accomplish. Similarly, we had the financial analysis that the Department of Finance selected a few of the actions in the plan to just take a dive into seeing how much it would cost the city upfront to enact these actions, and then what over time might be return on investment or cost savings. So for instance, when you're putting solar panels in, there is an upfront expense, but over time it does reduce your energy bills. So those things were considered in that financial analysis. Next slide, please. So while the plan outlines what the city can do to reach these goals, there will be some real challenges as we work to achieve them. The CAP DP3 sustainability plan and solid waste management plans alone have over 600 action items related to climate resilience, each with their own timelines. So soon there will be a comprehensive management plan, and the Rec and Parks playbook will be added and have some climate resilience focused actions in those as well that will add to that list. And as we all know, agencies have limited staff and they also have additional priorities. So our colleagues and other agencies played a really integral role in helping to develop this plan. However, we will really need to be working together and continually monitoring to see how we can advance these actions along with the other priorities of the city. Of course, funding is always a challenge when it comes to anything, any kind of plan. Some of these things will be expensive, so we do need to, we've looked at the fiscal analysis, but there will continue a need for fundraising and other resources to enact these actions. And several actions will require legislative action as well. So that means that's outside of our abilities as agency employees to be able to change that. So we'll need to be collaborating with legislators as well. And similarly, other priorities rely on the action of the public or private sectors as well, and in some cases in communities and individuals. So for example, one of the biggest community priorities related to this plan was improving public transit, and that requires the MTA to act. Also, the plans call for transition to fossil fuel-free appliances and vehicles. So we'll need to look to incentivize that for people to adopt those practices. But it does take action on the part of individuals and property owners. So, and we'll also be monitoring things like supply chain issues and so on, because there is some talk about, with the statewide push to really transition more and more to electric vehicles, if there will be enough vehicles available for people to purchase. So, that will be some things that we'll be continuing to monitor and act upon as best as we can. And then finally, one thing that was reported to us during public comment was that a lot of the incentives that are out there are sometimes difficult to understand or navigate, which can deter participation. So, in line with our education and awareness raising, we'll really need to be looking at how to help walk people through that and make it as easy as possible for them to take advantage of those benefits. Next slide, please. So looking forward, as a next step, we'll be looking to launch the plan. So the disaster preparedness plan recently passed at the last commission meeting. So we will be looking to combine the launch of the climate action plan and the DP3 publicly, because to people externally, it doesn't necessarily matter which plan it is. They're all related actions. So we can combine them and make it easier for people to understand and see how to get involved. We'll be coordinating with the mayor's sub-cabinet on climate resilience and agencies to really start taking those actions that are outlined and looking at how we can put them into action. We'll be briefing different agency leadership, the DOP teams, and other key stakeholders on the plan itself, and focusing our annual sustainability open house on, using some education to launch and just to gain some awareness of the actions in this plan. And then, of course, periodic convenings and reports and data and other public information related to these plans. We're really looking to increase that so people can really see what's happening, what's changing, where there needs to be improvement, and so forth. And then, of course, emphasis on increasing awareness and education and outreach. All right, next slide. So with that, I'd love to welcome any kind of questions or comments anyone has.
I have a couple of comments in chat.
Right. Checking the chat out right now. If I can find it, where is it? I apologize.
So is the comment period still open for this?
The public comment period closed at the end of October. So at this point, we do have it up, and if anyone wanted to submit comment for this commission or for the other commission, the planning commission, which will happen later this month on the 25th, they can go on Conveyor to do so, but the public comment period closed previously.
Thank you.
And then there's one more question about, compared to previous plans, what are the new insights driving action on this climate plan? I think you covered a lot of that in what you shared.
Yeah, so there's, as I mentioned, we really did try to anchor this really with community engagement and balancing the strategies that will get us to the goals with what's the highest priorities within communities. So, that is something that the previous plan did, but this one we really tried to emphasize that. This one, we really aligned the plan with how we can reduce carbon emissions, greenhouse gas emissions. So, each of those strategies was outlined and there was measured to see if we were to do that, would we reach the goal? So that's a big piece of that, and really looking at how we can line up actions with outcomes. So Lisa has her hand raised.
So I think you answered my first questions when I clicked on the link and it went to the comment site. I thought, oh, is this the same one with the previous comment? So this is the new edition with whatever comments that it.
Yes, everything is integrated in there. The previous one is
Um,
still up on the website and you can see that with people's comments that they submitted. But the one that it was posted more recently is the updated plan.
Great, because it looks like from before there were like under buildings, it was like community buildings and then municipal buildings, and now it looks like it's just all together.
Yep.
Um,
What we did
like-
was just to explain that.
No,
what
I
we
was just
did
gonna
was we noted
ask,
that
like-
we noted as community or municipal, but we didn't break them out because it just made it a little confusing, we felt.
Yep, no, I like that, but I just think I was looking at it, I'm like, oh, where's that other section? So
Oh, okay.
I
Yes,
haven't
yes.
really had time to review that or see what the changes are. And then appendix 4 and 5 seem pretty important. I'm assuming that's where all of the strategies and actions come back together.
Yes.
But it kind of ends at page 93. Are there other links for that? to
I will
review?
double check. That should be the PDF of all of them, but I'll double check and make sure that's up correct.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions or anything they'd like to discuss about that?
I have a question that hopefully is related. My name is Anna Rule. I'm a faculty member at the School of Public Health in the Department of Environmental Health and Engineering. Last week, we were made aware, a group of investigators, my main focus area of research is air pollution. And so we were made aware of a piece of legislation that is being proposed, I think, this legislative session to implement some environmental justice. I think it's called the Maryland Environmental Justice Bill. And so unfortunately, this bill, it does not include or cover air pollution permits for any of the existing facilities, and that it also would not cover permits for many of the new sources of air pollution. And so you mentioned in one of your slides about the need for legislation to implement some of these actions. And I feel like this could be sort of like low-hanging fruit if the commission can help raise awareness on the fact that a legislation that doesn't include air pollution or air pollution permits would be like a missed opportunity, given that most of the, I guess, climate and are related to air pollution sources. Thanks.
It's a great comment. Thank you.
Maybe a quick follow-up. So for the question about what is different about this climate action plan, so I do see a lot of climate plans and they all have the same flavor. Baltimore is a unique place, unique culture, unique flavor, unique challenges on the ground. I just would have thought that maybe, I guess I'm wondering if anything unique came up in the discussions about what people want to see, given the challenges that the city is facing.
There were definitely throughout the process, within the public engagement periods and, the community engagement in general. And that was something that was really folded into this plan. It's on a plan level, so it's not necessarily the community level strategies, but there's the room for it in there. So, there's certain things like, for instance, developing a heat mitigation plan, things like that are things that the community really raised as priorities, heat island effect in neighborhoods and so forth. We recognized that we didn't have a plan for that, that this plan couldn't be that. So, there's some things that are calling for those actions. And, really there is a great emphasis on looking at how we work with communities on these different strategies. So I think that's really a lot of that will be in the implementation. And that was something we heard throughout the process is, that there are resources in the neighborhoods, whether that be knowledge resources or just community access to communities and so forth, that we fully intend to be engaging throughout this.
Thanks.
So is there a motion of commissioners to adopt the plan as presented for movement on to the planning commission and forward?
Can you just explain the process? Like I said, I just got the link last night. I didn't really get confirmation that this was the new one, but do we need to approve it for the next people to approve it? Or do we have 2 days to look at it, or what's so quickly go over that? Or if I know I was late, so if you already did that, my apologies.
Is it, do you want to cover that? We are able, or would you like?
It actually needs to be adopted by the commission in order to move forward to the planning commission for them to adopt the entire plan. So unfortunately, since this is the only monthly commission meeting that we have, this is the time that all of our we're together as a body to be able to adopt. We can maybe just take a few minutes to break, to just kind of have an opportunity to scan and answer any questions that you might have of Val.
Yeah, I'm
And
not gonna. Oh, go ahead, Amy.
yeah, Lisa, I apologize. We weren't able to get things to you all a little earlier. There may have been confusion around the link. We can, I know right now we have like a certain number of commissioners on. We do need a certain number of commissioners on in order to vote for the approval. But Mia, we can maybe kind of revisit it after some other items on the agenda, after we go through those and see how many commissioners we have on, if that gives you some time. We certainly want to make sure you're able to really look at it, and we certainly don't want to rush, but we do have to acknowledge we initially had planned to approve the plan last month in December, and it got pushed back due to some scheduling challenges. And so we don't want to delay this a whole nother month, but totally understand wanting to really be able to process the information before voting on it.
Do we have enough commissioners here today?
There are currently 7 commissioners on.
Fellow commissioners, have you guys all reviewed it? I'm not going to be the person to hold this up, right? Ultimately, it's a good thing. It's moving in the right direction. I definitely don't want to hold up the process.
Ava, can you do me a favor and just give me a quick phone call, please? Thanks.
I have had some time to look over it just briefly today, and from the earlier iterations of it, I saw a few things that had changed, but haven't had time to dig into the deep details. It doesn't seem like too much substantive has changed, Lisa, but I know it's always like last minute asking to sign something, kind of pushing in front of you. So I totally get it.
Yeah, and I'd say I haven't been able to review, but I've been able to look at the parts of the plan that I have expertise on and feel comfortable with those.
Any other commissioners, just thoughts?
Yeah.
Ms.
So
Rob,
this is
Councilman?
Don Bill. Yeah. So I am happy with the plan, and as mentioned, it's a step forward. I think in my estimation, on as we move forward, if this is the plan, we talk about like real action items and real collaboration with the communities that will be involved moving forward in the plan. There is certainly some things I think that should be added to it, but I think what has been presented is very comprehensive, and I have no problem making a vote today.
Excellent. So, anyone else, commissioner or community member, who wants to weigh in on just thoughts? We have a little break right here.
Okay, so what we want to do is be able to give commissioners time to process the information before we have it be recommended for the planning commission. Can someone tell me when that meeting is? That it
That's
needs
on
to
the
go?
25th.
Okay, so what we'll do, we'll call for a special meeting of commissioners in order to make the recommendation to move forward. So at this time, I think we're ready to move on with the rest of the agenda of the meeting. Val, thank you very much for your presentation. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Billy.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Unfortunately, you are not a commissioner, and so we cannot take your support, but thank you for all that you do as a member of DHCD.
And I guess we'll send out an email a little bit later about that special meeting, sometime between now and obviously the 25th.
It'll need to go out tonight.
Days.
It's
Yeah.
gonna have to go out tonight, so we'll do that. So Jared, do you want to lead into the next portion of the meeting?
Sure. So we can talk about Sustainability 101. If you all got that. Actually, just really quickly before I do, I've seen a couple people pop in the lobby that were in the meeting. Is anybody having issues getting kicked out of the meeting or having to log back in? All right. So we wanted to talk a little bit about Sustainability 101 across the commission. That's what we are here for, obviously, in the Sustainability Commission. And we wanted to talk a little bit about what that meant to not only us as Sustainability Commissions and what we do here for the city, but also get to know each other a little bit more on a personal level and find out what brings us here to the commission and what drives us, what are our areas of expertise and interest, and what we could be doing more of. So in the email that Amy sent out last night, to inviting everyone in the email, there were just a couple of questions that I can pull back up. Really just generally getting an idea of what brings you to the commission, what interest and expertise you have. Does anybody have a chance to take a look at those over in advance of the meeting? And if so, I wanted to just call on a couple of our commissioners just to see if they had any answers, responses about sustainability and what it means for them and what the commission means to them.
Should I go, Jared, since I had some clues on the previous topic on the agenda? Obviously, I'm very passionate about buildings. I'm going to just switch the order of the questions around so I can provide a little bit of my background for those of you who don't know me.
I'll pop them in the chat as well. Too.
I didn't, type anything out specifically. So my area of expertise is buildings. But when I think about sustainability and it's really that total environment. So it's that interconnection between humans and how they interact with cities and the built environment and nature, each other and the whole planet. So I'm an architect. I worked for a large architecture firm for a long time. I have over 25 years experience in architecture. And a year and a half ago, I went to work for the American Institute of Architects because I really wanted to help push the whole profession forward, not just work for one company, but to work actually for the built environment. So my comments on the CAP were specifically in that building sort of section and how to think about that big term, not only for Baltimore's goals, but for the state's goals. And ultimately, everyone goals for 2030, 2040, and aligning with the Paris commitment. So I think that kind of answers my definition of sustainability is everything. And why I like to focus on buildings, but to me, that really encompasses all about the built environment, social and natural environment. What I struggle with, and I think this was kind of the icebreaker that I kind of missed, was sometimes I think when we words like climate action plans and carbon emissions and all these things, it doesn't really mean anything. To just, I'm just a Baltimore City resident. I'm just trying to do my job. I'm just trying to get my kids to school, pay my bills. I don't have time to think about this big, right? I'm already stressed out enough with my life and things going on. So to me, it's how do we bring sustainability and climate action things that we're talking about on this commission and this plan, to people's everyday life so that it's meaningful.
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah. Gonzalez, so you have your hand up there.
Yeah, I was just going to say I could go next and answer the questions if you'd like.
Yeah.
I think I would, a lot of this will be echoed from like what Lisa said. Sustainability is everything. Excuse me. What it means to me is the future. It's not, I think we have an opportunity to plan for the future, and that's what we're doing now, and not putting band-aids on problems that currently exist. So sustainability is about the future to me, whether that's youth, whether that's responsible development, environmental protection, environmental resiliency. I echo this as like pretty much everything, but everything focused on the future and prospering equally in the city, so that we make sure that all the protections and the developments that we do is seen through the lens of equity, and I think this commission has done a great job of that. So continuing the work on sustainability is about the future, obviously, and and what I do is particularly in communities and youth and education. That leads it to the next question. There's expertise, and what my role in commission is: community engagement, youth engagement, environmental justice. If no one knows, I'm the executive director of the Environmental Justice Journalism Initiative. Our motto is "Our community, our story." So we want to be able to tell people, or give the ability of people to tell their story of environmental justice or injustice, to be honest, and advance their cause, so they can be empowered with education to address their community leaders, their schools, their politicians on making better decisions about environmental justice. And that's what my focus or role of the commission is. What aspects I feel not accessible to, I really get lost in the transportation conversations. I'll be honest. Transportation is hard for anyone to understand. I feel like, and especially when it comes to policy, transportation is a place that I feel like my contribution is the weakest. I'm very happy to learn and very happy to listen. And, I certainly support, better transportation in the city, but when it comes to the decisions that are made about transportation and the different feelings that are around that issue is something that I could be better at. I should be better at and understand more.
Santel. And I appreciate you talking about the things that give you pause. I know in mine, I was just generally talking about legislation and a legislative agenda, and that's one thing I'm specifically here to learn from other folks about to get more information on. I saw for my city had their hand raised. I wanted to, not exactly sure who that is. I wanted to just hear from commissioners first and then open the floor up to anyone else if there's still time there.
Hi, everyone. This is Ben. Sorry, I'm struggling with the mobile app today as I run around. Can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, great. Thanks. Let me just jump in maybe and give a quick answer to these questions, and thanks so much for doing the exercise. The definition of sustainability is funny. So I'm Professor at Johns Hopkins, and we've been working on our own university sustainability plan, kind of in parallel to the city's work on the climate action plan. And like this question, you think it's the first thing you answer, and it's taken us 2 years, and we still are really grappling with it. So I often fall back on some of those simple definitions, right? Just ensuring that needs are met by the current generation while preserving the resources needed for future generations to thrive even more. And so there are problems with that definition. It's kind of out there. It's kind of like, like what the UN said years ago, right? But I just try to keep it simple while we all think about how it applies in each condition. When it comes to what really looking forward to digging in through the commission. So again, I'm at Hopkins. I'm an earth scientist, so I feel like I always look forward to the ability to kind of dig in on some data and look at both the climate challenges facing Baltimore and the opportunities for decarbonization in a quantitative way. But really, what I'm most interested in is how we bridge that kind of information with our participatory community and citywide efforts, which is the commission offers such a powerful, I think, position to try to make those connections and see how we can move to an area where it's not just saying, hey, here's what the science says, right? But as we all know, that we're kind of co-designing, and a lot of the work that all these folks on the commission are doing in their day jobs, right, and their weekend and evening jobs is making those kinds of things possible. So trying to figure out how we co-vision, co-design our future as a community using the best available information rather than have it being a one-way channel. And then when it comes to what challenges, yeah, so the idea of the legislation being challenging definitely resonated with me. And I would say even more on a day-to-day, understanding the different levels of government and the agencies within Baltimore City's government and what each one does and therefore where the levers are is just something that I don't have a great mental map on. And I've learned a lot through the commission over the last few years, but I continue to try to learn and be guided on that because it feels like a bit of a Byzantine puzzle sometimes to figure out who's doing what and who has the power to change.
Thanks, Ben. Real deep insight there. I'm looking around really quickly to see if other commissioners have anything to add. I see some phone numbers here, and I'm not sure if they are if they've dialed in, if they're commissioners who are dialed in or just participants. Also, don't want to put anyone on the spot if you're not wanting to participate either. All right. Well, I'll go just in case no one was unable to see my email or the email that was sent out a little earlier. My name is Jared, and Jared Lyles, and my position on the Sustainability Commission, what it means to me is really sustainability is something that you put into thought when you go to design something. Much to echo what people before me have said, it's to think about the impacts of what you're doing right now, not only the output that you might want, but the unintended outputs that that might happen and that might have effect on the environment, your community, other people in the community, and just essentially putting together a system that can continue to operate indefinitely. So A lot of the human systems we put together aren't sustainable, and I want to move the world more toward that, especially in Baltimore City, make them both sustainable and inclusive. My role in the commission kind of focuses on my expertise, much like Lisa. I'm a certified energy manager, and I do a lot with building energy and just energy in general with the NBA and sometimes DHCD, working with some of their programs through private consulting. So I have a different lens, especially on the Inflation Reduction Act and how it will impact some things down the road, both from our client's point of view and from an environmentalist point of view. I want to share that with the commission. And finally, what access do I feel, or what aspects do I feel might be a little inaccessible or difficult or challenging? Again, to echo what people have said before, I want to learn more about how good ideas and good intentions go to law, change into law and policy. And part of my reason for being on this commission is to better understand that. And also to, just like others have said, is to communicate that to other people in the community and get them more involved and engaged. So I think that's really our goal as the commission, to get folks involved and engaged and be the voice of those in the community, to kind of be a check and a balance versus what's going on at a higher level or the political level versus the citizens and the people who those laws affect, and also the other people who are not commissioners who are here at this meeting. So I did see some hands earlier. I saw For My City had their hand up. I'm not sure if it was in response to one of the questions being put forth, but just interested to hear also real briefly from other folks who might not be on the commission but come and sit in on the meetings and see maybe how the commission can better serve you, what your interests are, so forth.
Yeah, I mean, Jared, thank you. My name is Chris. I'm the director of an organization here in Baltimore called For My City. It was just in response to Lisa's comment, I think, about, you know, breaking down sustainability and making it easy and accessible for the, you know, the community members, right? I hate to say the simple folks, but, you know, the community members, and be able to connect. One of the things I would like to see the commission do more is work with nonprofits like us. We're a nonprofit here in Baltimore that is changing how we view sustainability. I think what we've seen is that the commission, to me, and this is just my experience, I'm speaking from my experience in working with, you know, the city and some of the services, is that we're locked into old school thinking. And we're afraid to move forward into new school technology, a new school way of doing things. And you know, we are, you know, proof of that. We have one of the largest composters here in Baltimore City. Our machine can turn any type of food waste into a certified usable soil. And we've been struggling to get, you know, participation from our city to just come to our facility and see what we're doing. In reference to that, we've got so much pushback on it. We have currently one of the largest composting program in Baltimore City. We have over 1,500 residents signed up to our free composting program, where we pick up food scraps to the house, right? There's no other largest compost program free for any city in the United States, and we're doing that right here in Baltimore. But we're still struggling to connect with the sustainability organizations, which is, you know, and I hate to speak like this, it's frustrating for me as a leader in this space. And I think that as a commission, we need to break these walls down. There's not just For My City, there's a lot of organizations in this space right now that's doing pioneering things. And we have to get out of our little bubble, the Baltimore City bubble that we have here, and say, you know what, let's expand and let's see who else is doing what. And let's try to boost these organizations and support these organizations. I
Chris, I think I want to thank you for sharing this information. I think you gave a really great point in where we have the opportunity to grow. The role of the commission is the oversight of the sustainability plan. And so that is the limit of what we have. But what we do have is the opportunity to make sure that we can convene people, raise it up, like Jared just asked if you had some thoughts about it, and then kind of move from there.
And
So
that's my point with the plan, is that we have to incorporate that in the plan. In all the plans before, there's a section on there where it says work with the nonprofits. There's a huge section. In the sustainability plan before, there was a massive budget of where money is supposed to be spent in these organizations within the community, and it's not happening. And that's my point, is this commission has to be the oversight of that plan, which means that you have to hold and read the plan and hold the city or the whoever's doing the planning and the action accountable for execution of that plan, right? If that's my understanding. So that's really my 2 cents on it, is if we're putting this in the plan, then we need to follow through and make sure that these things that are in the plan are being created, followed through to actionable items.
absolutely.
I hear you loud and clear there. You know what? And I would like to talk to you offline, just a little bit more maybe about what we can do and chat about that as well.
But I think more to
That's
like
a
some
good
of the
point.
point that Chris is making is that the plan does not necessarily outline some of the financial commitments. And sometimes you can have a plan that even the best ideas can't be implemented because there's no budget for it. A plan is different than having a budgeted way to make things move forward. So I look forward to having a conversation about
But
where we need
not
to go.
everything is always financial. Like for me personally, I don't need any money from the city, right? For my organization. Is it going to help? Of course it's going to help. But what we need is just the plan should incorporate awareness of what stuff is happening out there in the city. And that's where we're lacking, is we're picking and choosing which organizations we're going to promote and support. And it doesn't, not everything is financial. And that what drives me crazy is every time we say, incorporate people in a plan, it's not just financial. It could just be awareness. It could just be posting that service on our website, right? And putting these things in the plan, putting these restrictions in the plan that, hey, if this organization's doing something, vet them. If they're executing what they say they're executing, put it on the website so that people in the community are aware of what's going on. So not everything in a sustainability plan has to be like dollar tied into it. It could just be actionable items, which again is what I'm saying. It just could be actionable items that we can put in the plan, like, hey, every month we review organizations that's doing food rescue in the city, that's doing composting in the city, and we update that list and we track that data, right? I had someone from Hopkins just now said data is key. Data is key. We have over 5,000 residents participating in our food rescue program, and we have every single data on them, from demographics to age to income level to every single thing we know about these families. So creating a sustainability plan around these families can help us really understand the communities that we're serving. So we tend to focus on sustainability a lot, or too much, on the financial side of it. Whereas there's a lot of organizations that's doing this work that really don't care about the financial side. We care about the outcome of creating change through connection.
Yeah.
So
That's why missing the boat.
One quick thing, if you can do me a favor, sorry, Jerry, I'm gonna come in real quick and ask for, if you can put your information in the chat so that we can record this on how to get back. Of course, this whole meeting is recorded, so it'll be available on the website later. But this is an opportunity to chat. If you have something, anyone that is on this call with your camera off, if you want to have a way for us to get back in touch with you, make sure that you're on the mailing list. Take an opportunity now and go ahead and put that in chat. Then I'm going to go over to Commissioner Donzel Brown. Donzel?
Thank you, and thank you, Christopher, for your comments. I think your comments are spot on. I hear your frustration, and they're right. Your frustrations are right. I have a nonprofit myself, but yeah, I would like, Jared, if you want to, I would like to be part of that conversation around communications to the community, because I think Christopher is right. It's not so much a dollar amount as it is awareness, and I think that we should really, I mentioned this before when I talked before, in the upcoming year, I hope that we can start making awareness our priority, because there's a lot of good things happening in the city and a lot of innovative things happening in the city. And what I think Christopher is trying to say is the city needs to get behind these efforts. Yes, money is great, but also just get behind these efforts to create awareness and create a infrastructure for nonprofits who are doing innovative and very smart, and from food instability to solar and building projects, making sure that the entire city knows about it and not just a select few who are making the decisions.
So Donzel, in your role as commissioner, how would
Mhm.
you uplift, within the scope of our work, how would you uplift those groups that don't have an opportunity to have exposure?
So as a city, as Christopher pointed out, make sure the city is promoting
No, I said
events.
as a commissioner.
Me personally? I can, with my platform, with my nonprofit, and I've already reached out to Christopher, I can tell the stories of those organizations that are doing that work for sure. I have a staff that can do interviews and stories, movies. Well, Jared knows because he helped me do some of my first ones. Um, and and then there's making sure that the city is aware of those efforts that people are doing around the city. And as a commissioner, I will continue to promote that to anyone on this call. And I'll put my information on the chat. Please reach out to me, because my organization is built on uplifting people and stories and ways to engage the city and the community. And as a commissioner, that's what I would, offer that out, and I'll put my information in the chat.
And I'll mention that we have a meeting upcoming in March as well, just talking about some of the community activities, community outreach that's going on too. So we're going to try and showcase some people from actual communities around the city who are doing different things to make their communities more sustainable. So stay tuned for the emails from that. I'll be actually reaching out a little closer to that meeting to see if anyone else is interested as well. And as always, definitely interested in having an offline conversation about this. I put my details in the chat so I can be got in touch with as well. I wanted to move on to the Sustainability Commission legislative priorities and coordination processes for public comment. If now that we've just introduced each other and gotten to know each other a little bit more, one thing is wanted to talk. Well, one reason we did this activity is just to get folks engaged, a little bit more engaged in the meeting and in the commission in general. So definitely started a good conversation. And again, we want to continue this offline to see where the community could be of more service, and also figure out how to promote and advocate each other's activities toward that. Mia, did you want to take it with the Sustainability Commission legislative priorities and coordination processes?
Actually, what I'm going to do is hand it over to Ava. She has a quick presentation she's going to do here, just kind of take us a little further into the 101.
Okay.
Thank you, Mia, and good evening, everyone. So kind of following up on the presentation that Valerie provided about the city's updated climate action plan, I wanted to share some deeper dive information on a Climate 101 topic. This was actually something that our really great Sustainability Commissioner and co-chair, Mia Blum, recommended during a conversation she and I had. And so I think it was a great point and really helps to kind of unpack some of the details in terms of what it is that we mean when we use these terms. But it also helps us be more reflective as an office as it relates to how we can use language that is more accessible when we talk about these issues across the city. So with that, I'll go ahead and jump into the presentation. And again, my name is Ava Richardson. I'm the Sustainability Director for the city. And so just wanted to start out by just kind of laying out there and reminding everyone what our goal and charge is as an office. Based on Section 34 of the city code, our office was established to advocate for programs, policies, and actions by government, citizens, and businesses that lead to sustainable community change in the city. And so that's the framing that we want folks to have in mind when we go through some of the language that we use and how we're leveraging different tools at our disposal to reach that goal. Some of these tools are our climate action planning processes. And so that includes everything from our our sustainability plan to a food waste recovery strategy that was released in 2018, the updated disaster preparedness and climate action plans, as well as plans led by other city agencies, including Baltimore Complete Streets, which was a legislation passed in 2021 to support a different type of modal hierarchy that supports pedestrian safety. Our Baltimore, which will be released in, I believe, 2025, that is a comprehensive land use plan for the city. And every year we provide an update on the city's progress, not just on the sustainability plan, but our climate goals overall and our annual sustainability report. So just to unpack a little bit more detail about these plans, I've listed it here, and this is not at all a completely exhaustive list, but as Valerie mentioned during her presentation about the climate action plan, we have different plans that go really deep on a particular topic or issue. I know some of these planning processes can seem redundant, and we're asking people for a lot of engagement, but take that as a note and as a clear indication that we really care about community input across the city of Baltimore. And we know that we cannot do effective climate action planning or implementation without hearing from you as residents of the city. So we really want to continue to engage people on the implementation as well. And we do have to say, I know there can be some cynicism as to whether or not these plans get implemented. We do implement on these plans. We have positions that oversee the implementation of certain plans, as well as other agencies across the city. They have specific roles that are responsible for implementing a lot of these plans. And so I want people to know that your involvement and contribution and your feedback and comments really do not go unheard. There you are contributing to a tremendous amount of progress, and we really do appreciate it. And again, if you want to see updates on kind of like where the status of some of these goals are, we do try to release that as comprehensively as we can in our annual sustainability report. So just as a reminder, the Baltimore City's 2019 Sustainability Plan has 5 sections, as you see listed here, that include community, human systems, climate and resilience, nature in the city, and economy. We have a total of 23 chapters and 243 actions in that plan, as well as several measures of success. And so this is just kind of a summary of that. And in many ways, that plan was really looking more comprehensively at all sustainability efforts that we could be pursuing. And so just wanted to point out some key educational goals that we have in that plan, because I wanted to break down like what it is that we mean and we talk about when we say education. We definitely want to educate folks across the city and raise awareness as it relates to our climate and sustainability goals. But as we'll talk about a little later, we also have a duty and a need to also try and enhance climate literacy across the city. And so some of the education related goals and strategies in our sustainability plan relate to educating folks about energy efficiency and water efficiency, expanding awareness on particular energy efficiency programs, supporting education programming and programs as it relates to several different types of existing homeowner or household level based energy programs, also in educating folks or supporting environmental justice education. We also have recommendations to look at educational campaigns support the distribution of educational resources, which could come in the form of guides and toolkits, etc., and also educational opportunities in land leasing programs. That's an example of a very target or audience-specific educational approach. We also have goals that are related to education and pursuing more progressive actions in awareness raising campaigns. I highlight all of these just to highlight how important education and engagement is in our office, and it is really weaved in very intentionally throughout our sustainability plan, as well as our climate action plan and disaster preparedness plans. We know there was a huge focus on that, as you saw in Valerie's presentation, as it relates to education. But again, we have to move beyond education and into literacy. Within the city government, we have a goal of enhancing climate literacy among our city's workforce, among the city agency staff that work on climate change issues, because we know that it's necessary to constantly keep learning and evolving as our understanding of climate change science and climate change implementation and what the best practices are. We have to keep adapting to that and ensure that our staff are well equipped to adapt to that as well and have the knowledge needed to move forward change. And so we also have that same duty and responsibility to you as the public and as our residents to not just enhance literacy, but also to learn from you, to hear how we can improve our communication and education and engagement goals so that we are doing it in such a way that is culturally relevant, that is using language that's accessible, and that is really sparking and motivating more action and change. So tonight, just wanted to go over, and I don't know, sorry if there's some digital technical issues on my screen, but just wanted to go over a few kind of differences in some of the different plans that we have purview over and what it means, what it is that we are trying to achieve with those plans, where our role as a city is, what role the state or federal governments, and to the points raised earlier, talk a little bit about where some nonprofits come in or other institutions such as area universities. So when we talk about the climate action plan specifically, we are really looking at the gases that warm the planet. This includes carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. Generally, carbon dioxide is that doesn't have the same warming potential as methane and nitrous oxide, but it stays in the environment much longer. And so we often use carbon dioxide as a measure for all of these other greenhouse gases or these other molecules or chemicals that warm the planet. When it comes to the regulatory approach for that, so we talked about carbon neutrality and net zero, and I want to appreciate and acknowledge the conversation in the chat about the confusion around those terms. So Baltimore City has set a carbon neutrality goal, as Valerie mentioned, and our climate action plan is providing a roadmap to that goal, to achieving carbon neutrality by 2045. But in the 2024 climate action plan, we're really looking at an interim goal of a 60% reduction compared to our 2007 baselines by 2030. So what does that mean? What does it mean to be carbon neutral? What does it mean to be net zero? When we're talking about carbon neutral, we're talking about basically reducing emissions, and that is really where we want to focus as a city, the actual and true reduction of emissions. But there is a potential to sequester carbon. There is a potential to capture carbon in vegetation and soil. So we know that has to happen as well. When we talk about net zero, we're looking at some of these other compounds, right? So when we're talking about carbon, we're balancing the, carbon neutrality. We want to balance the carbon that's released and the carbon that is absorbed, either through trees, through soils, or other ways to capture carbon. Some technologies, which right now, to my understanding, are kind of greenwashing, but there's a lot of research going into some of these technologies. When we talk about net zero, we're thinking about net zero emissions as it relates to all the other chemicals, as it relates to methane and nitrous oxides and other greenhouse gases that warm the planet, just to differentiate those two terms. Now, in terms of our climate action plan, we are only looking at specific gases that warm the planet. There were a lot of questions that we got very valid and really helpful to think about as it related to air quality control or air quality improvements as we were updating the climate action plan. And while certainly we know there's a lot of overlap between these goals of reducing emissions and improving air quality, especially when we know sometimes the sources of the emissions, there are also some sources of some pretty some air pollutants that we really don't want to be releasing into the air either. So when it comes to air pollutants, the state generally has the regulatory control and power to monitor that and enforce air quality control. Generally, the state, through the Clean Air Act, is looking at a few specific compounds to measure air quality. And that includes particulate matter, both the sides of PM2.5 and PM10, ozone, carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, and lead. That doesn't mean those are the only kind of nasty things that we don't want in the air. There's a lot of things out there that we don't want in the air and that we don't want people breathing because it's a threat to folks' health. And we know it's a public health concern, but these are the criteria air pollutants that EPA tracks and monitors through a network of different air monitoring sensors. And then there's also hazardous or toxic air pollutants. This includes a long list of pollutants that are known carcinogens or known to cause a specific threat to human health, whether or not that's a threat to unborn children or a threat to vulnerable populations, or just a threat to any and everyone. Some of these examples include asbestos, toxic heavy metals, or dioxin. That's a particularly bad toxin that's produced when plastic is burned. So again, unfortunately, as a city, we do not have much control over air quality. We don't have many enforcement levers, or we also don't control the network or the sensor networks or the monitoring networks that give us data on air quality. But we can work really closely with the state to track and understand a lot of that. And we can certainly advocate for understanding how we can enforce some of those regulations. I will provide some background on the Baltimore City Clean Air Act, which was passed a few years ago. And what that did is it provided the city, or it would have provided the city more enforcement mechanisms to regulate air quality through parameters that are already outlined in the federal and the state Clean Air Act. Unfortunately, that legislation was overturned by the states, by the courts, because the courts deemed that as a local government, we did not have that power to regulate kind of more locally stringent air quality monitoring parameters. Now, there's a great point to be raised in that should we as a local government. But it's something to keep in mind when we think about environmental justice issues and the types of strategies that we're pursuing, knowing that history and that background, what it is that we have control over in the city. And quite frankly, we don't have complete control over carbon dioxide emissions and methane emissions, but we definitely can work with different entities and organizations to set that goal and track our progress. But our enforcement mechanisms to achieve that outside of city operations are limited, though we are in a really good position because there's a lot of work going on at the state and federal levels to achieve those goals. But I did want to lay that out just to really make sure that when we talk about what the scope of the climate action plan truly is, it is, again, reducing these chemicals that warm the planet. And we care very much about all the other air pollutants and improving air quality by removing those from our environment. But we're very conscious and we of the strategies that we have access to in order to address that and where we can best engage with the state or federal government. Right. This is just an example of some of the air monitoring systems in terms of where the status of those stand. I think these were screenshots taken yesterday. So our air quality is pretty good, but it's cold. We know we typically see this going towards the red end during a hot summer day where we may have a particularly high degree of ozone or particulate matter in the air. And I do just want to point out here, the air quality index, again, is looking at different substances in the air. And so some people may remember this past summer, we had a purple air day. So that's this box right here. and that was stemming from forest fires in Canada. But that was measuring air quality. We also have code red air days that are specifically looking at the heat index. And so there are different scales and ways to measure things that can also sometimes be confusing. And when that purple air day was issued, that was the state who issued that that notification. When code red days are issued for the city of Baltimore, our health commissioner issues those. So again, some of the parameters or what we actually have in our control also lead to how we're able to communicate and who's making the decision to determine when we are reaching climate conditions that threaten the public's health. As Valerie mentioned, we really wanted to anchor the climate action plan to equity and environmental justice goals. And so we wanted to make sure we kind of started off with the definition, or we had everyone on the same page in terms of what it is that we mean when we talk about climate equity, when we talk about environmental justice or frontline and fence line communities, and define those terms, as well as a lot of other terms that we talk about a lot across the city and across our work. But we really want to make it clear that when we are doing this work, these are the core goals, these goals in gray: climate equity, environmental justice, in particular, those climate challenges that impact frontline and fence line communities, such as energy burdens. These are the goals that we want to fundamentally address. Some frameworks for understanding how we address those include climate mitigation. So those are the actions taken to reduce the release of carbon dioxide, methane, and other greenhouse gases. Again, the gases that warm the planet. Climate adaptation is specifically looking at the actions taken to help communities respond to more intense weather patterns as a result of climate change. Our 2024 climate action plan is the city's climate mitigation plan, because it is that roadmap to helping us reduce our emissions. Our 2023 disaster preparedness plan is the city's climate adaptation plan, because it is providing us a set of recommendations and as well as analysis on our climate vulnerability as it relates to different climate measures. But it is providing us a set of recommendations to adapt to a changing climate. I highlight those because as we pursue climate mitigation and adaptation projects, again, we do that with environmental justice and climate equity in mind. Some of the mechanisms or the programmatic level interventions we may pursue to achieve that are below in yellow. That can include the adoption of electric vehicles or nature-based solutions, circular economy goals, as well as supporting cleaner energy, food rescue, community solar, and so on. And we do, I list those terms, and I do think these terms get very, are very much jargon, where we use them a lot, but don't always necessarily define them. We do define these terms in our 2024 climate action plan. I didn't list it here because I figured people can go and definitely look at those definitions in the climate action plan. But if there's anything, if there's any questions that you all have about how we're defining these terms or lack of clarity, or if you say, talking about electric vehicles doesn't resonate with folks, we want to hear that. If there's a better term we can be using to how we communicate these issues, let us know. And we want to be conscious of that as we engage in this work. Some other terms that I'm sure we've all heard at different points, or maybe you haven't heard, and just kind of wanted to put those out there because I want to hear from folks, like, have you heard these terms? If folks want to kind of like comment in the chat. And then in terms of how we define these terms, because not all of these are necessarily listed in our climate action plan. And I think for the definitions, for something like a just transition that I'll go into a little bit more detail about shortly, it may have a changing and dynamic definition that exists today, but could be a little bit different in 2 years, as our understanding of how this type of process is, or how that process unfolds. So I'll go through this and just kind of talk through some of these terms. Anthropogenic is kind of like human caused or related changes to the planet. And it relates to the era that we're in currently called the Anthropocene, where human activity has drastically changed the planet's climate. I'm sorry. Adaptive capacity, this is a term we define in our 2023 disaster preparedness plan, which I have a couple of slides on, and I'll talk a little more about that in a little bit and define that term, but it's really looking at the city's ability to adapt to the changing climate and make communities more resilient. Carbon sequestration, we talked about that. Soil carbon, or storing carbon in different vegetation. Again, there's some technologies that are talking about storing carbon, and the effectiveness of those are kind of to be determined, but that's when we take carbon out of the air and trap it, typically and ideally in some form of vegetation, whether or not that's trees, grass, shrubs, or soil. Co-benefit. It's another term you probably hear a lot. It's basically saying that, you know, we want to have more than one benefit when we're implementing a climate-related problem. How are we solving for multiple climate issues with the implementation of a single program? The urban heat island effect has been a serious issue that has impacted a lot of cities significantly, especially in 2023, as it was our hottest year to date globally. And evapotranspiration relates to the amount of water, or kind of like the water cycle, and how vegetation releases and absorbs water in the atmosphere. 100 and 500 year flood, another term that we use in our 2023 disaster preparedness plan. And now we have transitioned from these terms to use a 1% annual chance of flooding and a 0.2% annual chance of flooding. So in case things weren't confusing enough, no, but we from an analytic perspective, it was more accurate to, and it made more sense, because sometimes these so-called 100 or 500 year floods are not happening every 100 or 500 years. And so going towards a measure that actually relates to the likelihood of that level of flood happening was more accurate. Micromobility and multimodal. I used that term earlier just to acknowledge that, or just to put it out there, because I don't think a lot of people understand that term or know what that means. And sometimes what it can mean and how someone can be conceptualizing micromobility or multimodal may be different, but basically looking at different forms of transportation, whether or not that's electric bikes or scooters, as well as using different forms of transportation, from walking to taking a bus, to using other public forms of transportation. A just transition. So this, again, is a term that I think it has a dynamic definition, and the way that it is understood today could change tomorrow, or within the next couple of years. But it really looks at, you know, when we're talking about, for example, the coal industry and transitioning away from that, and that industry has been in decline for decades now, what happens to the coal workers in the communities that rely so heavily on that revenue? What does it look like to retrain a community who, for lack of a better way to describe it, who benefits from the revenues and the profits made from a polluting industry? What does it look like to support those communities, to support retraining, so that those folks supporting their families through jobs related to a polluting industry can now support their families through renewable energy industries, through connecting to the solar industry or wind industry? I think this is an important and critical concept to keep in mind. It is not easy, and I don't think I've seen any clear models for it that provided very easy ways to transition a workforce that's working perhaps in a waste facility that's maybe burning trash, and how you transition that workforce into jobs that now supports recycling and zero waste planning or circular economy approaches. And we talked about soil carbon already. So those are just some terms that I think you may all hear from time to time. and we may use. And I think as an office, what we really want to commit to is constantly walking through these terms, educating our public across the city, and really getting an understanding of what are better ways to communicate some of these issues. So again, as I mentioned in our disaster preparedness plan, we're looking at specifically mitigating climate-related hazards as well as human-caused hazards. And so that consists of a risk assessment, a capabilities assessment, and mitigation strategies. And so some of the goals in terms of what we're trying to achieve with our disaster preparedness plan has a lot of technical terms and jargon that I didn't know if it was as helpful to get into this evening. But we can definitely in the future meetings, as we support the further implementation and launch of the plan, get into some of that, some of those definitions a little bit more deeply. And I know we're kind of running a little short on time here. So, but just want to remind folks of the goals of the disaster preparedness plan when it comes to ensuring the equitable protection of health, safety, and welfare for everyone across the city, strengthening resilience, enhancing the integration of resilience services provided across the city, again, enhancing our adaptive capacity, and mitigating our hazards. But hazard mitigation is not to be confused with climate mitigation, because again, as we mentioned, our climate action plan is our climate mitigation plan that's looking again at the reduction of those emissions, where hazard mitigation is really looking at how we make our city more resilient and mitigate particularly the threats or risk associated with climate extremes. And just one example of how we do that programmatically is our Community Resiliency Hubs program, just to provide that context. And I think that was the last slide, and we had a couple of questions that were shared in the chat earlier, but I'll stop there and pass it back to you, Mia, for any questions or comments.
Sure, I want to echo Ben's comments in chat that this was an absolutely great presentation. One of the reasons why we wanted Ava to be able to share the work of the office and break that down just a little bit is that not only do we have experts within the office, there are plans that many of them, my screen has gone black again. Let me know if I can get a verbal, you guys can hear me, that'd be great.
Yes.
We can hear you, Mia.
Thank you. Knowing the work of the office and knowing that a plan is literally just a plan, and that it takes a bit of work to make sure that it's implemented, knowing that there are experts on the commission as well. That was something that we wanted to make sure that everyone had an opportunity to kind of hear some of that, so that as we move forward with engagement, we can highlight people that need to have an opportunity to share more with both the commission and maybe with the office, with the city at large through this vehicle that is the monthly commission meeting, and being able to see where there might be some opportunities to do some uplifting. So I wanted to just open it up and see if any of our commissioners had any questions or comments or wanted to follow up. And Donzel, you had a great conversation in there. So Ava, if you can take a quick look at some of the questions that Donzel had, I think this might be the beginning of a good meeting.
Yeah, so I was just asking in the chat, we don't have to go over all of this today, but I just will let the commissioners know and let the community know is that we are working on calibrating as much as 15 air quality sensors around the city. And I want to collaborate with anyone in the community. You know, we'll need access to a rooftop to put the sensors on there and that type of stuff. If you have access to that type of facility, and want to do it in a diverse way. So it's not just 15 sensors in South Baltimore. There's 15 sensors all around Baltimore to get a map of the air quality. And we'll be working with CERC on that and we're calibrating those now. I know that Coppin has, we're in conversations with Coppin, they have an air quality monitoring program. Hawkins does as well. And if the city, I was asking what sources the city is getting for air quality. Is it Hawkins? And I think it is. So that we can calibrate it so that our air quality is not redundant, our testing is not redundant. So if Coppin is doing something or Hopkins is doing something, we're not doing the same thing in the same places. So I'm opening the question up to the city and everyone involved. You know, if there's any ideas about locations for providing air quality testing, please let me know. If you live by a incinerator, if you live by a highway, if you live on the water, we want a diverse mix of information, and we want to provide that. My organization wants to provide that to the city. So anyway, Ava, we can have an offline conversation about this. But if you know, we could work together on doing that.
And Denzel, I do just want to share, because I don't know if you're familiar with BSEC and some of their work that they're doing in terms of distributing the weather stations, and Ben, feel free to chime in about that. But yeah, I think coordinating with that group could be really helpful with Ben and that team. But
And I can connect with you as well, Denzel. I have something in mind for a public-private partnership of a lot of data that are indoor air quality data that's collected from basically buildings that I have access to. So we can talk offline.
Yeah, we'll talk about that too, because that's very interesting. And the next phase of our partnership is going to be indoor air quality, which is a very more difficult thing to collect because you have to get people's permission to put sensors in their homes or businesses. But that's the next phase. And yeah, we'll talk about that.
Denzel, you have a few suggestions and offers for help in the chat. Can you put your information again on how people can reach out to you? And then if there's any kind of minimum requirements that you might have for those that could help spread the word, that'd be great to put that in chat as well.
Yeah, there's not really many minimum requirements. It's just, you know, just reach out to me and we can spread the word in any fashion that people would like on their websites or our website. Yeah, that's available. That would be available. Though when it comes to the air sensors specifically, it would be rooftop access, safe rooftop access to the sensors. That's really it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Any other questions from commissioners? All right, hearing none, I know that we've had a couple that have had to drop off. We will not be able to get to the part of our agenda today that talks about our legislative preview. And so we will get back in touch with everyone on that. We'll also be sending out an email to see when we can have a special meeting to make sure that we can give people enough ample time to take a look at that information from the CAP plan prior to making a vote on that. And so at this point, I would like to just open it up for public comment. We've had it all along the way. But if there's anything else that anyone else would like to say prior to us closing this meeting, now's a great time. Okay, well, hearing none, I will adjourn the meeting for the day. We'll meet again in February and look forward to seeing you all then. Have a great night.